gentlemen, this Red Gaming Titacom video that is further discussing the Xbox One's graphical prowess in regards to both Titanfall and as a whole. So some of you may have heard the latest rumours regarding Titanfall's beta. Now how this basically works is, when asked about the native resolution of Titanfall on the Xbox One, at least the beta, Abbie Heppe, who is the community manager at Respawn, confirmed that the beta is running at a native 792p. This, by the way, is an increase from the previous resolution of 720. However, the final build of Titanfall could well increase in native resolution to 900p when it's been finished. And we'll get into that in just a moment. So 792p may not exactly be a standard resolution. Many of you are familiar with it. Is 16:9 aspect ratio, so that's 1408 by 792. By the way, guys, I'm doing all of this as an article so I can link to some of this stuff, because we're going to be discussing quite a few points. So if you want to follow along, well, by golly gosh, you can simply check the article. But anyway, now this comes to us because we're going to be moving forward on something else in a second, but let's move back for a moment and speak about something a couple of days ago. Now, a few days ago, Rebellion Games was speaking about the Xbox One's ESRAM. You remember that? But primarily the ESRAM, of course, for those of you who are unfamiliar with it, although I imagine many of you are by now, is a fast area of memory on the Xbox One. It's basically on die, and 32 megabytes, very fast, but it's there to basically help the lackluster DDR3. Now, the purpose of this is Rebellion said that there's just not enough memory for 1080p with super duper high resolution assets and so on. The producer, however, did state that the new SDK is improving the resolution issue, and this is also going to filter through to Respawn and Titanfall, who are now, of course, as we just discussed, hoping to get the game running at 900p at around the 60 frames per second mark. Obviously, they can't promise it's going to stay locked at 60, but for the most part, they're hoping it will be 60. Now, there have been even further developments from famous Mortimer. Now, he is, of course, a fairly well-known industry insider and speaks to a lot of games developers, and he has said that, I quote, they have to make serious cutbacks. By the way, he's responding to someone asking, and I will post the links for this so you can follow along. But he's responding to someone asking about, can the Xbox One handle 1080p at 60? And he says they can now, they just have to make some serious cutbacks. Forza is at 1080/60, and the frame rate is steady even with tons of cars on screen. But when you look closely at the assets of the game they use, the cars are outside of the cars are really awful. The PS2-like crowds, for example, the trees that look like they're made with polygon budget of 4. None of that matters when you're driving fast, but the point is that the cutbacks had to be made to get the resolution. And the tools will get better, but developers will have to choose between resolution / frame rate / effects when making games. That's true of the PS4 as well, of course, but it just has a higher ceiling. The only way to have everything, no matter what, is to have a PC, but then you don't get console exclusives, and PC are decidedly lacking in sports games. Now, he was questioned regarding what exactly this SDK is going to do, and I'll discuss this in just a moment outside of his quote, but he did point out that I can't say any form of certainty what it is that it will do. All I was told is what they think it can be done. And Abbie isn't, by the way, speaking of Respawn's Abbie, isn't blowing smoke up anyone's assets. So, going out of quote for a moment, what he's basically referring to there, of course, is the source development kits, also known as the things that they are using to develop the titles on. Now, I did mention a moment ago regarding the development of games on ESRAM is definitely becoming easier. The ESRAM is not easy to work with. We knew that previous to the system being released. Now, that's not to say the PlayStation 4 is getting a get-out-of-jail-free pass. It does only have 1.84 teraflops of computing power, which Compared to like the Xbox 360 or the PlayStation 3, sounds like a hell of a lot. However, in reality, it's not really a massive amount. One of the reasons, of course, that console power stretches so much further is because A, you're coding bare to metal, and B, it's a fixed platform, so that means you can get the most out of it, and C, it typically has lower overheads. Now, there's been some criticisms leveled at the Xbox One. One of the primary ones regards the ESRAM. Some people have said, well, why don't they go with GDDR5? And it's a fairly... It's a fair point, really. But the problem with it, as far as I understand, and this isn't defending Microsoft, this is merely pointing out the facts, Microsoft had a vision for like a multimedia-based console which required a substantial amount of memory because they knew that the reserve slice of memory for the operating system was likely to be a couple of gigs plus. Therefore, it stands to reason that they needed at least 8 gigabytes of RAM in the system. So how this basically would work is that they pretty much weren't confident that there was going to be enough memory in terms of 8 gigabytes of GDDR5 memory available, and that's why even the PlayStation 4, up until pretty much near release, was penciled in to have 4 gigabytes of GDDR5. Another cause for concern is because of the ESRAM, it's a lot cheaper to produce, which when you consider that the Kinect is bundled in, and I know that's going to be a source of contention for a lot of people because I personally don't like the Kinect, but I do not speak for everyone. You know, you may love it, which is fair enough. It's an opinion. I don't, dislike the Kinect per se, but it's just not something that I really think improves the gaming experience. Regardless, it did increase the cost of the console, and therefore Microsoft had to offset that somehow or another. One way they could have possibly improved this is to have it rather than like on die would have been like an external die. EDRAM basically would have been one way to do that rather than ESRAM. The only problem with that, of course, is it would have cost more money and more likely that it would have been a lot more difficult for them to produce. The benefit, however, if they was to have done that, is they could have definitely gone with a larger memory solution, for example 64 or 128 megabytes, like you see in Intel's Haswell processors. Now, in regards to the processing power of the Xbox One, and this has been something that I just want to touch on because a couple of people have been asking me about this. Like, people have been a little bit curious, what do I think of this? Well, you've of course got the GPU time reserve of the system, which has been reduced from 10% to 2%, and that's certainly going to help matters. And as well as these new SDKs, bug finding kits, and overall more experience of developers. The difference is, it's not going to improve the power that is in the system, right? So, in other words, 1.32 teraflops of computing power is still 1.32 teraflops. The difference is that it's becoming easier for the teams to actually unlock the full potential of the system. And that's been another point that we've discussed in other videos, where Helldiver, for example, the developer there, which I've completely forgotten the name of, I'll try to remember to link it in the article, they were discussing that, the power of the PS4 doesn't actually mean anything to us as developers because we're not pushing the system. What does mean something is the fact it's easier to develop for, and that's often actually the bigger primary focus for small developers. And so there's a lot of different moving parts to this. So what am I saying? Is this doom and gloom for the Xbox One? No. Several reasons for this. One, Microsoft are making large headways into tackling the issues. That's not to say that the performance gap is ever going to diminish. It could improve a little bit versus the PS4, but I think the PS4 is also going to improve as well. So most likely, give or take, the gap is going to remain fairly consistent. I'm not saying it won't improve a little bit, maybe 5%, here or there, regardless. The most important thing, however, is Microsoft are going to make the system easy to develop for. Therefore, even if it does have a power shortcoming compared to the PS4, hopefully it won't be so much more difficult to develop for that it puts off indie developers. And I have read and heard from indies who have said, quite simply put, they would love to have developed for the Xbox One, as well as the PS4 because, well, it increases their market share, so why the hell wouldn't they? But they just didn't have the resources to pretty much learn how to program for the Xbox One, right? And that's not really a good thing, because the PS4, I'm not saying it's a flawless system, but it was pretty easy to use. Anyway, what really matters, of course, is the games, and the games, because it doesn't matter if you've got a system that's 40 flops of computing power. If it sucks in terms of the games available, that's a really major point. So Microsoft have got some good exclusives lined up, so hopefully that'll be the problem, that'll be the thing swaying people. Regardless, I think that's just about it for this particular video. Hopefully I've come out fairly sense-making, if that actually made sense, because it's pretty damn late here in the UK. But regardless, I'll see you soon. Take care, bye for now.